Welcome to the Bradford Literature Festival. Sairish, it's a great pleasure to welcome you back to the festival. For the benefit of our viewers, Sairish Hussain, the author, the wonderful author of The Family Tree, is with us today, and we are going to have a Q&A session just running through Sairish's journey to the path of becoming an author who is taking the book world by storm. Sairish, it'd be lovely to start the session by actually finding out a little bit more about The Family Tree. Would you just give us a brief overview of the book?
Yeah, of course. So it's The Family Tree is a multi-generational family saga set in the north of England, and we follow three family members over the course of 3 decades. So the book starts with Amjaad, who's just been widowed, and he's left with 2 small children to look after. As the years progress and as the kids get older, there's quite a tragic event in the form of a brutal random attack, and it kind of sends the family off into different directions. So the story follows each of them as they try to find their way back to each other.
Sairish, we've known each other for a little while now, and there's lots and lots of things that I'd like to find out about about how The Family Tree has ended up on the bookshelves. But we've got some questions from some of our young people as well, some of our school audience. They've sent some questions in for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with one of the questions that has come in, which is, how long did it take you to write your book? And I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the process of how you came up with the idea and what actually got you started on this journey.
Yeah, thank you very much, Syima. So it took about, from start to finish, I would say about 5 years, just over 5 years actually, to write the book. So I was in my final year at university. I studied English language and literature at Huddersfield, and it was my 3rd year, and I just had this niggling idea in my head. So the book, I've got the book, I'll just show you. I never fail to fill the book when I get a chance. So it started really, the idea, with a single father and his daughter. That was the initial idea. And my whole sort of final year at university was spent just letting that idea brew in my head and stew, and what's going to happen, and I couldn't get those characters out of my head, and I was quite eager for my dissertation and all my essays. I just wanted everything out of the way so I could focus on this. And I was very blessed because I got a first in my degree. So because of that, I was awarded a scholarship, which allowed me to progress on to master's study. And I did my master's in creative writing. So it wasn't a taught degree, it was a research degree, which meant I had to decide on a project and mostly work independently. So that's where I started writing The Family Tree. So I wrote the first 20,000 words for my master's, and then again I was very lucky and I got a distinction, which meant I could progress onto a PhD, and that's where I finished writing the book. And I met my publisher it was 2017, and I met my publisher at the Bradford Literature Festival. So that's been the process really from start to finish. And then obviously when the publisher gets involved, lots more editing. And then even when it's finalized, advanced copies of the book come out first, which they came out last year in June. And then the book wasn't actually published until February earlier this year. So from, start to finish, I would say over 5 years it's taken, the whole process. It's a very lengthy process. I would say it's a marathon, not a sprint.
That is definitely a marathon. But it must be very exciting to see your name on that book cover and to see yourself on the bookshelves.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the best things about being a published author, is being able to go into your favourite bookshop and seeing your book on the shelves. So our local Bradford Waterstones has a small area, dedicated to just Bradford local authors. So when the book came out in February and I went in, they had a whole table just dedicated to The Family Tree, and then a little sign saying, "Oh, Sairish Hussain, this is Sairish Hussain's debut, who's which is a local Bradford author. So that's definitely one of the best things, as well as if you got. So I went into Leeds Waterstones, and there was a few copies there, and I just pulled my Sharpie out and signed my book. You know, that kind of thing could get you thrown out if you're vandalizing the graffitiing on the books. But obviously, when it's your own, you're allowed to do that. So that's definitely one of the best things about it.
That sounds really exciting. And I remember maybe about a year ago seeing a photograph of you on Twitter with your grandparents and the book. So are your grandparents here, or were they in Pakistan? Had you travelled?
Yeah, so they were my dad's mum and dad in Pakistan, and my uncle went to Pakistan, and I had, at that time, I only had the proof copies. So I sent them 2 copies. And then I instructed my uncle, I said, I want you to like get them dressed in their nice clothes and sit them down, and I want proper portraits and pictures of them holding the book. And then unfortunately my granddad passed away in January, so he didn't actually see my finished copy, but at least, you know, I've got those pictures of him holding the, you know, the advanced copy, and so that's, you know, that's something I'll cherish just forever. And you know, he got to see it, so yeah,
That must have been really exciting for them and really exciting for you. Has this whole process been really exciting for your family? Are there any other sort of people with budding literary aspirations in your family?
No, 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 it's just me. But yeah, they have been very excited, but also, I mean, I've at times felt so out of my depth, you know, like it's a completely different world, this literary world, this publishing world. So sometimes it's been quite, you know, difficult, I suppose, when I've had to go down to London and participate in, you know, some of the events there. And I feel like I'm kind of, sometimes you kind of feel like you're the odd one out, because most people are either from London, and you know, publishing is notoriously not very diverse. So I'm there with my Bradford accent, and like sometimes, actually, my publisher is very good, and they, you know, work really hard to make their list quite inclusive. But yeah, sometimes, you know, we had the event at Bradford Literature Festival last year, and I was saying, you know, to all my family, so like some really posh London literary people are coming up, so you better be on your best behaviour.
It's quite an exciting process, isn't it? To actually meet the publisher and, you know, end up with the book at the other end. How did that happen for you? Because, like you're saying, you know, the publishing world can be quite daunting if you know, if this is not something that you are familiar with. Getting into, you know, getting into publishing, becoming a published author, it can be quite an arduous journey. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about how that happened for you?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that it was kind of like a fairy tale with me, and it's not normal the way in which it happened to me, but part of that is because of the Bradford Literature Festival again. Just, you know, having something like on that scale happen in Bradford has just been so exciting for me and a lot of people that I know. You know, I remember, you know, seeing all these cool, amazing events happening, but they were always in London or elsewhere, and I couldn't get to them. So to have such, you know, a festival in Bradford has just been incredible, and I've been attending religiously since day one. And it was, I think it was the 3rd year of the festival where I attended a panel called Book Bidding Wars, and obviously the room was full, you know, wannabe authors, you know. And on the panel there was a lady called Lisa Milton, who's executive publisher at HarperCollins, and she once the event was over, she sort of hung around outside, and people were going up to her and talking to her and sort of pitching their novels that they've been working on. So I decided to do the same, and we got talking, and she offered to read my work, which was really kind of her. And I would have been happy with any kind of feedback, you know, from somebody on, you know, somebody from of that position. But I got the most amazing email a few weeks later saying that she absolutely loved my book and she wanted to be my publisher. So yeah, it was definitely a fairy tale. In normal circumstances, I would have had to pitch to agents who are we kind of like the gatekeepers of the publishing industry. And then they in turn would, you know, if I was to be taken on by an agent, they would then pitch to editors. Lisa would kind of like be the last person in that process, where the editor would then pitch that book to Lisa. But I kind of went the other way around, which was really amazing. But it's very notoriously, you know, a very difficult industry to break into. There's so many writers, so many submissions. Agents just get hundreds and hundreds of submissions a week. So to be able to stand out is one of the most difficult things. But again, because of the festival and the circumstances, I was able to sort of break in, thankfully.
No, that's amazing. I think we should we should now change the strapline of the festival and make it, you know, making wishes come true.
Definitely.
That's really lovely. I think from our side to know that, you know, the festival has been able to play that part, but also to hear what a wonderful journey that's been for you. I know you were just saying about, you know, publishing can be difficult to break into, you know, that feeling of being slightly out of place because, you know, everybody's from London and you're from Bradford. And I think, you know, there is a real thing for women with having imposter syndrome as well, and thinking, should I be the one who is standing in this place? And I think when you are, you know, a woman of colour, that can actually be, I suppose, even more pronounced. How, at the moment, obviously, there's a lot of, you know, there's lots going on in the external environment, and there's a lot of talk around publishing and, you know, and publishing being more diverse. But obviously, that conversation has been going on for quite a long time. I mean, what do you think about that in terms of, you know, more diverse authors being published? Do you think there's a bit of a lack? Do you think more needs to happen, or do you think there's good progress being made?
Yeah, definitely. I think progress is being made, but a lot more could be done, because I think, I mean, one of the topics that I looked at for my PhD actually was diversity in the publishing industry. And I think we have to be careful of tokenism, like, oh, well, we've got one Muslim author now, we've got one Black author, that's enough. And also editors and publishing houses sort of gravitating towards, you know, similar stories, similar narratives. And actually, I had an event yesterday where I said that in the scheme of Black Lives Matter and, you know, Black stories mattering, you know, I read somewhere, somebody said something that really resonated with me, which was that it's more subversive to publish stories about Black joy than it is to publish stories about Black trauma, which, you know, and that can go for, if we're talking about Muslim stories, there's a tendency to have, the only time, you know, I've always said the only time I've felt like our stories have been interesting enough for people to write about or to make films about is if it involves terrorism or forced marriages or cultural issues and things like that. And they're not the primary concerns of people of colour on a day-to-day basis, and that's kind of been neglected. So I think it's also, the onus is also on the writers to push boundaries and try to write things in a different way, not feel pressured into writing what you think will sell and writing what you think will be accepted by publishers. And then publishers also need to try and be a bit more bold and brave and, you know, take risks. And I always give the example of the movie Black Panther, because again, it was a case of, oh, well, all Black casts, people can't relate to all Black casts. And they absolutely did, because it was a massive commercial success. That's something that, you know, I've heard so many stories about publishing where authors have been told by agents and editors that, well, can you make sure you make one half of a love relationship white? Or, you know, we don't like this foreign setting, can you set it in something, you know? And just not everything has to fit into like a neat stereotype. It's very damaging on a on a wider scale, it's damaging and it's dehumanizing. There's, you know, wider consequences to that. And I think everybody kind of needs to work together because, you know, a lot of the times, you know, people they won't have a Muslim friend, they won't have a, you know, a black friend. And when they're reading a book, that's all that they'll know about an entire group of people just by 400 pages in a novel. So these things do have wider consequences, and we need to try and challenge that in all art forms, really, not just literature but film and TV. Yeah.
And how aware were you of the stereotypes around, you know, South Asian families or Muslim families when you were actually writing the family tree?
Very, very, very aware. Because I think, and I say this, you know, as somebody so I was 8 years old when 9/11 happened. So I don't remember a time before 9/11. So all I remember really is growing up and just being absolutely bombarded with, you know, just negativity, not just on the news or in the situation communities around me, but also like there became this kind of fascination with 9/11 type of narrative. So we're going to make loads of programs about young men becoming radicalized, and you know, there was a deeper sort of interest into the Muslim community that followed. So it's just been just a cycle of negativity. I can't honestly think of it like a positive. And I'm not really about writing, I didn't really think that, I want to write a positive portrayal of Muslims. It wasn't that, just something realistic and human and, you know, three-dimensional, because the characters in my book, you know, they're very flawed and they experience some pretty awful things. Some of them do some horrible things, but it's sort of the you know, complication and complexity that's needed for people to, you know, read about these characters and think of them as, you know, full complex human beings. So just with the father figure, for example, you know, some of the stereotypes I've come across with the Muslim patriarchs, you know, they're strict and overbearing, tyrannical. You know, young men are always, you know, angry and militant. Women are never anything other than oppressed and passive. And so I just really wanted to challenge all those things because they're not realistic to me and the people that I grew up around. And I grew up in Bradford. You know, I am surrounded by Asian people. So yeah, that's definitely something I was very aware of. And you know, it would be a lie to say I didn't think of any of that when I wrote the book. I thought about it a lot. I was very conscious of all the decisions I made when I was writing the book.
So would you say that that was a narrative that you were consciously writing against?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. My supervisor at university, Michael Stewart, who's also a writer, he kept calling it a counter narrative, because this is a counter narrative to, you know, all these stereotypical stories that are just constantly churned out. And you know, again, it wasn't just me being anti-stereotypical just for the sake of it. You know, I genuinely feel like as though all the characters in my book, they exist in our community everywhere. Like that's what human beings are like. It's just that it's just been completely stripped away in any kind of depiction of us in, you know, film and literature, TV.
So one of the questions actually that we've had from one of the students is, how far is the family tree reflective of your own experience? You know, I think people always say that the first book especially can be quite autobiographical. And is that true with the family tree? And where did the inspiration actually come from?
The actual plot and what happens is all made up. It's all out of my own head. But definitely, I feel like there's a little bit of me in all the characters. There's my family, friends, you know, they're there in the pages. You know, my auntie was reading the book, and every time she came across something she's like, I know what this is about. This is that time when this happened, you know. But yeah, I just, you know, another thing is the book is set in Bradford, but I don't actually mention Bradford by name until right at the end. And that's just because I didn't want, you know, I didn't want all the negative stereotypes that people have of Bradford to just be reflected as soon as they see Bradford on the page. oh, this is about Asian families, also it'll be about a forced marriage and some kind of honor killing. You know, I didn't want any of that. I just thought I will describe Bradford, how I've experienced it, and I'll let the reader sort of experience the same thing. And then at the end, when they see that in the last sort of couple of pages, when they see Bradford mentioned, they'll be like, oh, Bradford, okay, fair enough. You know, so a lot of the, you know, even just the friendship between Amjad and Ken, Libby and Zahra, you know, this idea that, oh, Bradford is so deeply segregated and nobody speaks to each other and everybody's hiding behind their veils and all that kind of, it's just not true. I mean, yeah, of course we have our problems, but you know, I would say that people here get along a lot better than they will in some very, you know, middle class white areas, or, you know, whatever. I think because I suppose class acts as like a gel, a social gel, so we can relate to each other in a way in which that we probably can't relate to other people, you know, other people. So just that, those kinds of little things are definitely reflective of my experience growing up here. But the actual plot is all made up.
So now that the family tree is complete and it's out there on the bookshelves, are you writing another book?
Yeah, yes, I'm writing another book. It's quite early stages, but yeah, I'm working on book 2. It's not going to be as I was going to say, it's not going to be as big as this one. I'm going to try and tone it down a little bit, and it's not. Because I had 3 viewpoints going on here, so I'm going to try and tone it down to just 2 viewpoints. But it's kind of, again, it's early stages, but it's kind of like an unlikely friendship story between a grandfather and his granddaughter, who are sort of estranged from each other. So one of the protagonists of that the second book is an elderly Asian man, which again is, I've never heard or seen any kind of story told through the eyes of, you know, like my granddad's generation who came here and what they went through, and how he kind of relates to a 16-year-old stroppy teenage girl. So that's what I'm working on next. So yeah.
Well, as the mother of a stroppy teenage girl, that sounds really, really interesting. And I think also probably particularly pertinent because, as you said, there are not many stories that are being told through the eyes of the first generation of immigrants in this family, particularly from South Asian background. And there's a really valuable history there that actually is in danger of being lost. So that sounds really, really interesting. I'm really going to look forward to that. So one of the other questions that we have from one of our young people is, what is the best thing about being an author?
Oh, okay. So apart from going into a bookshop and seeing your book on the shelves, you know, it's definitely the reviews that you get, and not reviews from like a new. Obviously, if you get a review from a newspaper or some, you know, media sort of outlet, that's amazing and incredible. But you know, I read a review a couple of days ago from there's a book club. They're reading my book, and honestly, like it really made me so emotional. I almost started crying. It was you know, just, you know, just knowing that, you know, your words and your work has affected somebody in that kind of way. It's the readers really, and what they say that's more important, and it definitely makes it worthwhile. One of them said something about, you know, Saahil, the young male character in the book. You know, he visits the mosque frequently. He goes to the mosque, and you're waiting for the radicalization to start, and it just doesn't start, and it never happens. And that just meant everything to this reader, and that's exactly what I was hoping to achieve. So yeah, hearing from readers is one of the best things about being an author.
Oh, that is really lovely. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier about the counter narrative, and that's very much spot on, isn't it? Because I think most of the tropes when mosques are involved are very much about radicalization, although for most people it's actually a haven for peace and you know, developing their spirituality. So that's actually really, really lovely to see. So in terms of our young budding authors out there, or even our older budding authors out there, what advice would you give to someone who's actually looking to start on this journey?
I would say, I think people often give advice and they say things like write what you know, and that's true. But I would go deeper. That definitely write what you know, and don't feel pressured into writing things that you think people expect from you. I've worked because I work well. I as you know, I've been a PhD student, so I've read a lot of student work, creative writing work from the first year, second years, third years, and I especially seek out the work from the Asian students. Like, I want to see what they're writing about, and sometimes I just feel I do feel quite disheartened because I still see a lot of forced marriage stories, a lot of stories about somebody being radicalized, those things that you would expect. I read one about somebody going in, trying to get into Syria, like a jihadi bride type story. And I feel like as though, and I really want to know why people feel like they still have to write those things and they don't have to. So I don't know whether it's because you've, again, all your life you've been bombarded with those stereotypes, and you think, oh well, that's what I need to write about to become successful. And you don't need to write about that. Just write what you know, write what's important to you and what makes you happy, and just also be mindful of the fact that you can push boundaries, and again, it's more subversive to write about Black joy or just joy in general, about your community, than about trauma. Yeah, that's what I would definitely say.
It's a very interesting point, because I suppose what it's making me think is, are people writing this because actually that is what they know, because that's what's been internalized, and what expectations are doing to people's sort of creative imagination. So that's a really interesting and valuable piece of advice. So following on from that point, and I know you were talking about what lovely fairy tale experience you've had in terms of going into the publishing industry, but if there isn't anybody around to sort of wave the magic wand, and people want to take that first step, because one of the questions we had was, what happens when you've actually written your book? How does it go from being a Word document on your laptop to actually getting to the bookshelves? So what advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into the industry, particularly, as you were saying, a lot of the industry is centred in London. I know people are starting to move outwards now, but obviously we do have our own independent publishers in the north as well. Yeah. And I just wonder if you could give a little bit of guidance to people who want to take the first steps.
Yeah, I mean, definitely do, I would say, because before my fairy tale moment at BLF, I was obsessed with looking at agents and how to get published. Like every writer, that's what everybody does. I had like a list of agents that I was going to contact. So you really have to do a lot of research. Don't just sort of send your work out like just as you would like a CV when you want a Saturday job. Just really kind of look at the agent and what type of authors are already, which type of authors are on their list already. Agents give a lot of information on their profiles about some of their favorite books, and for example, I remember looking at one agent, and she said that 1,000 Splendid Suns, well, Khaled Hosseini was one of her favorite authors, and he's one of mine. So I was like, okay, great, I'm going to pick that one. So it's about finding an agent. If that's the traditional way in which you would get published. So finding an agent that reflects your experiences and you feel like as though you could work with. But I would also definitely say networking. I mean, I've got other writer friends, and I'm really always encouraging them, come to the festival, come to Huddersfield Literature Festival, Bradford, let's go, and sometimes people can be a bit reluctant or a bit hesitant, or they're busy and they don't do it. And I know that if I was walking around on my own at the festival. But all those years I've been walking around on my own because, my friends don't necessarily have the same interests as me. And I understand that it can be daunting, just even going and being an audience member of like a panel discussion on your own, sitting on your own. I understand completely that it can be daunting, but if I hadn't have done that, I hadn't have, had the courage to approach Lisa, because I remember standing waiting in the sort of queue that was forming around her, and I was thinking, oh no, I'm scared. I think I'm just going to go. Oh no, she's too busy. And if I had just walked away, then I might, not be here right now talking to you. So networking and going and, meeting people who are from that industry, and I can't, place enough emphasis on that. You can do plenty of things on your computer, on your laptop, but actually going out to these things is different, and you just don't know where, when, and how an opportunity will arise, like it did with me. But of course, you also mentioned independent publishers who are real sort of trailblazers. They, the books they publish are always on the, big awards, the Booker Prize and the Women's Prize. They always get onto those prize lists, indie books. And that's because I suppose independent publishers are, real risk takers, and they really, they're very bold with their choices. So just because it's not HarperCollins or it's not Penguin, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that the quality is any less. If anything, it's probably even more with independent publishers, just because their main of course, publishing is a business, it's about making money, but I think for indies it's definitely, the emphasis is on the story. So yeah, any advice, just try and get involved. There's even Facebook groups, and like I just followed on Twitter before my fairy tale. I just followed bookish Twitter like all the time, all the book accounts, like festivals, book people, and you already, even though I was too scared to like engage with them, I just still felt part of like a community just on social media. And you see opportunities on there that you could access. So you have to really put yourself out there as well as just approaching in a traditional way.
So we've talked quite a lot about the book and about getting published. I think it'd be really nice, especially for the young people, because this is going to Bradford schools, to find out a little bit more about your school life. And and do you think that had any sort of that formative time? Has that helped with the family tree and getting to where you are?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll be honest, I remember meeting somebody, a literary person, who asked me, oh, so were you privately educated then? I was like, no. No, I was not privately educated. I went to Rhodesway School, which is now Dixon's Ollerton Academy. And at the time when I started, when me and my sister went to Rhodesway, it was in a bit of a bad way. It was in special measures and they were really struggling. We had like a change of head teachers about 3 times. But, at the end of the day, English was my thing. I was really, I was so uncool at school because everybody knew how good I was at English. I was known for being good at English. So I was there helping everyone with their essays and that kind of thing. But I had particularly 1 or 2 amazing English teachers, and that's all I needed. It didn't matter that all the schools not right at the top of the league table. That didn't matter because I had a teacher who was, willing to invest that time and encourage me and that kind of thing. And then when I stayed at Rhodesway for my A levels as well, and I did really well. This is another thing, particularly with South Asian communities. I did good at my GCSEs and A levels. I got like A's and A stars. So everybody assumed that, oh, okay, so you're going to go and do chemistry or pharmacy or something like that. And I was like, no, actually, I want to do English. And my family were brilliant, but some other people kind of roll their eyes at me like, where's that going to get you? If you're going to do English. And I didn't get into, because I really wanted to go to Leeds University. And it's, that's like it's just that access, isn't it? That's a Russell Group uni. It's one of the best, But I didn't get in. And I got in at Huddersfield, and that's the best thing that's ever happened, because Huddersfield does creative writing, and that's where I met Michael, and that's where I did my master's and PhD, and now I've got this big, another, and I've got this big, you know, book. So, you know, in terms of school, just because, you know, I just think if you have an interest and you're really passionate about something, you know, nothing can stop you really. Nobody can hold you back if you're really willing to, you know, put the work in and focus, regardless of what type of school you're at. And, you know, you didn't get into the Russell Group uni, you didn't get, you know, it doesn't matter. If you want to do something, then hopefully, you know, you can do it if you're willing to work for it.
I think that's actually a really interesting point, because, and a really important point, because teachers are actually so important, aren't they? And sometimes I think that isn't always acknowledged, just how just what a big influence teachers can have, and the massive you know, changes that they can actually make in people's lives. Because I know, you know, certainly for me as well, I had a couple of teachers who, when I look back, I think, yes, you really, you know, you really made a difference to me. You really did things that actually probably changed the sort of the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, it's totally true. And it's actually lovely, because my English teacher, obviously I left school and everything, and for 10 years we haven't been in touch, and she changed schools as well, so she moved to Parkside School, and like I went and I found her, and I went to see her, and she just thought I went for a catch up, and she still remembered me. And then I pulled my book out, and she was just absolutely like thrilled. It was really an amazing moment to be able to show, because she was definitely very, you know, she really encouraged me. And she used to say to me that when it came to marking our English work, she'd always put my work right at the end. She goes, because it was something to look forward to. Yeah, so it was really lovely to be able to go and show her my book. Really amazing.
Oh, that's really lovely. That's really heartwarming. And that must have been just such a special moment to be able to go to your English teacher and say, "Here's my book."
Yeah. Definitely.
So, my last question to you, Sairish. So, given we're talking about English teachers and school, and what did you enjoy reading when you were at school? What were your go-to books or authors?
I mean, I remember like Roald Dahl all the Roald Dahl books, like obsessed. And then I was kind of that generation that grew up with Harry Potter. Like the books were coming out as we were growing up, and like the actors that are Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, we're like all the same age, like you know. So I was kind of the Harry Potter generation. But then I think I remember reading books at school in English. To Kill a Mockingbird, I remember reading. You know, we read The Handmaid's Tale as well at A level. Like I read The Kite Runner when I was about 14, and that had such a huge impact on me, because, you know, the characters were, I mean, very different to me. The story, you know, they're set in Afghanistan. The characters are Afghan, you know, but their names were Amir and Hassan, and, you know, like just seeing those names, and, you know, I recognized some of the customs, the religion. That just really impacted me, because I think, and obviously it's such a beautiful book, so being able to, I remember thinking, you know, this is what I want to do. You know, if I could write like this and make people feel the way I felt reading this, you know, that would be amazing. So that definitely inspired me. But as I've got, you know, went through uni, I love like the African American authors. I love James Baldwin, Toni Morrison. I love Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Eddie Smith, Rohinton Mystery as well. They're some of my favorite authors. Who are your favorite authors, Syima?
I mean, I'm not part of the Harry Potter generation, but I have to say Harry Potter. I mean, J.K. Rowling's definitely one of my favourite authors. So I'm a big science fiction, fantasy, buff. So Neil Gaiman and Philip Pullman and Tolkien. But I read quite widely. Anything apart from horror, because I just can't.
I agree.
I get that out of my head. Sairish, it's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for giving us this time. And I have to say, you know, it's actually a really proud moment to have you at the festival, and to have you as part of the program, and to be doing this Q&A with you, and to have been part of that journey, and sort of bring the family tree on. It sort of feels almost like bringing it home. So thank you so much, and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Syima. And yeah, hopefully once everything has cleared up with the pandemic, we'll be able to meet and do something face to face instead of
Absolutely,
virtual.
absolutely. 2021, here we come.
Here we come. Thank you.
Thank you.